Hello and welcome to Series 2, Episode 3 of Saturday Morning Nostalgia. The year is still 2011 and we're covering a period from July to September with one little exception which I'll explain. So in this quarter of the year from July to September there were 4 things that came out in terms of paper magic. One was Magic 2012, which was July the 15th. The next up was From the Vault's Legend, August 26th. Then we had Duel Decks Ajani versus Nicol Bolas on September the 2nd. And also, just squeezing in at the end of September, would have been Innistrad. That was on September the 30th. But in the interest of not having a video that lasts well over an hour, I've decided to push the Innistrad sort of nostalgic look into the final episode, into episode 4. And I think I'll be doing that in future if I get to a situation where there's 2 sets coming out in a single quarter, then I'll just push over one of the sets, the later set, into the following quarter. So we'll basically end up with one set in each quarter. And like I said, sometimes because of the release date being at the very end of September, that will happen on some of these videos. So for Innistrad, that's going to be in the next video. So first up we have Magic 2012, came out on July the 15th. 249 cards, 101 commons, 60 uncommons, 53 rares, 15 mythics and 20 basic lands. As was happening with core sets at the time, we were seeing a 50% reprint, 50% new card split. With core sets, often it's really difficult to pin down specific themes and mechanics because they tend to be very generic. But there was definitely a minor aura theme running through this core set. The keyword abilities to look out for as we're going through the cards are Bloodthirst, which was, I believe, a returning mechanic, and something called Hexproof, which was a refined version of Shroud. The cards themselves came in 15 card boosters or 16 card if you want to include the promotional card that was put in there, like the advert card. There was also those little 6 card boosters. There were 5 intro packs, 2 event decks, a fat pack, which is where a lot of this came from. Also they started up this thing called a booster battle pack, which was 2 20 card semi-random decks plus 2 boosters, and it was a sort of twist on Pack Wars. So you basically had each had a 20 card deck. You opened a booster each, and then you would augment that 20 card deck with a certain amount of cards from the booster pack. As you'll see in a moment, out of all the sets I've opened, I think 2012 is what I've opened the most, and I was trying to think why that was the case. When we look at the commons, uncommons, you'll see I've got a lot of those, and I think some of that was due to the fact that I may have even opened 2 deck builders toolkits from around that period. I'm not sure a later period, and there may have been a lot of M12 in there as the sort of semi-random for the fixed element, should I say. So that could be a possibility. The other thing I think generally is that I opened a lot more boosters than I would normally open, and I think that was because I found this set was very useful for playing Pack Wars, and I think a few years ago, after 2012 was released, I got into playing Pack Wars, and I found that 2012, one, was fairly cheap to buy, and secondly, I found out of all the core sets at the time I was playing Pack Wars, it was the most Pack War friendly. So that could explain why I've done that. But I do remember doing several pack openings. I might have even done some deck building stuff with this particular core set, so that's why I've got a lot more rares than other sets that I'm sort of reviewing. The cycles in the set, there was a cycle of uncommon colour hoses, cycle of rare checklands, cycle of titans at mythic, cycle of mages, which I think, yeah, they were uncommon. Some planeswalkers at mythic, signature rares, which were planeswalker signature rares, and they were obviously rares. Some signature commons, again referencing the planeswalkers. Cycle of lucky charms. There was also this sort of little cycle of 3 artifact of empires, and we'll see if we see any of those. There were some mirrored pairs: dark favour, divine favour, great sword, and kite shield. The intro packs were Sacred Assault, which was white green, Mystical Might, which was, I believe, that was white blue, yeah. Grab for Power, blue black, Blood and Fire, black red, and Entangled Webs, which was red green. The event decks were Illusionary Might, which was a blue deck, which I've got, and Vampire Onslaught, which was a black deck. So let's have a look at some of the rares that I pulled here, and also the foils. So we've got Aegis Angel in the set, Angelic Destiny. Remember I mentioned there was a minor aura theme here. So we've got Angelic Destiny, 2/2 white. You can see it's at mythic. Enchanted creature gets +4/+4, has flying and first strike, and is an angel in addition to its other types. When enchanted creature dies, return Angelic Destiny to its owner's hand. Day of Judgment was in here. Gideon's Avenger. So this had a synergy with tappers. So whenever a creature an opponent controls become tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on Gideon's Avenger. Personal Sanctuary, another enchantment. We've got a foil Stave Off. I don't know how good that's coming up on the camera there. So, as I mentioned, there was a cycle of Planeswalkers. I was lucky enough to pull a Jace Memories Adept, a mythic. Also, illusions were a thing in the set. So you can see we've got a foil Phantasmal Bear and a Phantasmal Image, which is a creature illusion. Basically a clone illusion. Redirects. The Sphinx here, Sphinx of Yusun, Visions of Beyond, Cemetery Reaper. So one of the things you'll notice with core sets is there's often lords for some of the more common tribes. So in the case in 2012 core set, we had Cemetery Reaper, which was a zombie lord. So 1 and 2 black, creature zombie, 2/2. Other zombie creatures you control get +1/+1. 2 and black, tap, exile target creature card from the graveyard, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. Divine Favour, I think you heard me mention that there was a mirrored pair, and the mirrored pair was Dark Favour, Divine Favour. So we've got a Dark Favour here, which is the reason why it's in this binder is it's a foil one. You can see I've got a Distress foil in here. And the foil in this was quite nice. You can see it's got sort of foiling the tattoo on the side of the head there. Monomania, Runescarred Demon. There's a foil of Smallpox foil there. Sutrid Ghoul, another zombie. Goblin Chieftain, so this is a Goblin Lord here. 1 and 2 red, 2/2 haste. Other Goblin creatures you control get +1/+1 and have haste. Grim Lavamancer was in this set. We've got a nice foil fireball there. A classic card from Magic's history. Mana Barb. Foil rare in the form of Scrambleverse. nice chaos card here. For each non-land permanent, choose a player at random. Then each player gains control of each permanent for which he or she was chosen. Untap those permanents. And there's a regular scramble verse. Spiders were a thing in the set. I think there was possibly a spider themed intro pack. Doubling chance. A nice full version of that. For each creature you control, you may search your library for a creature card with the same name as that creature. Put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Regular doubling chance. Got a tree folk there that cares about forest. Oh, there's hexproof. I mentioned about hexproof. So with hexproof, this creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. So you can sort of contrast that with old-fashioned Shroud. We've got another Planeswalker, Garruk Primal Hunter. There's a Hydra in the set. Right, so Flourishing. Adaptive Automaton's an interesting card. So this is a... I'm trying to think of the best word to describe this, but it's a lord that's particularly suited where you don't have a lord for a tribe, but you can use it to enhance a tribal deck where you do have one. So what it does, it's 3 generic mana for a 2/2. As Adaptive Automaton enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Adaptive Automaton is the chosen type in addition to other types. Other creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. And then finishing off, and I mentioned these, there was a cycle of lands in the set, and these were what were called check lands, I believe. So what happened was, when they came into play, they checked whether you controlled a certain type of land. So in the case of Dragonskull Summit entered the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain, and then it taps for black or red. And Rootbound Crag was the same thing, but for red or green. So those are the rares that I pulled from various boosters. So that gives a actually pretty nice overview of some of the concepts in the set. We'll look at the player's guide just to get a feel for this. So with the core set player's guide, they do tend to have a very similar format to them. So what they would do is they'll sort of go through some of the newer stuff that is in the core set now that they're doing this sort of 50-50 split between reprints and new cards. And then you get a description, I suppose, for the benefit of anybody that's really new to Magic and is picking up a core set because they think that's a good starting point, is that they sort of go through the different colours. And what they can also do now with the presence of Planeswalkers is also provide a sort of character focus on those concepts. So you get a background story for the Planeswalker, a bit about the concepts and philosophies behind playing blue, and then a sort of sample deck which has the Planeswalker in it. And they do the same for black, for green, and then they talk a bit about artifacts, lands, and this mini cycle of Ever Empires. So there were 3 artifacts: Crown of Empires, Scepter of Empires, and Throne of Empires, and together they're much more powerful. So they've got this 3 card synergy going on. And then they do, as always, the 10 coolest Magic cards for the set. So we've got Garruk, Chandra, Jace, Bloodlord of Vazgoth, Oblivion Ring was in the set, Primordial Hydra, Goblin Grenade, Gideon's Avenger, Tormented Soul, and Adaptive Automaton. And you've seen I had quite a few of those. And then we go on to the set encyclopedia. And then you can see there, I don't know how clear that is, but you can sort of get a feel there for the basic land artwork. And I mentioned there were 20 basic lands. So that would have been 4 of each piece of artwork there. Okay. So if we move on now to a couple of the intro decks which I would have opened, and also an event deck which I purchased at the time. So intro decks first. So one intro deck that I purchased from the set would be this one. So at the time, my sort of thing, so the idea I had at the time for this, in terms of intro decks, was I would sort of buy a couple of them to sort of play against one another. So these particular intro decks have 2 rares and the rest are commons and uncommons. So I'm just going to go through this so you can see. So we got Flame Blast Dragon, 4 red flying. When Flame Blast Dragon enters the attack, you may pay X red. If you do, Flame Blast Dragon deals X damage to target creature or player, and it's a 5/5. And the other rare was Warstorm Surge. 5 and a red enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. So quickly going through, there's a Storm Blood Berserker in here, a couple of those, Onyx Mage, so these are all our uncommons first of all, Goblin Bandchuckers, Vampire Outcasts, a couple of those, Crumbling Colossus, 2 of those, Volcanic Dragon, Swiftfoot Boots is in this deck, Tectonic Rift, so moving onto our non-creature spells, uncommon, 2 of those. Then our commons, Goblin Arsonist, a couple of Goblin Fireslingers, Tormented Soul, Goblin Tunneler, a couple of Dusk Hunter Bats, actually 3 of those, Dusk Hunter Bats, a Manic Vandal, Blood Rage Vampire, a couple of those, a couple of, actually 3 Blood Ogres, Gorehorn Minotaurs was in here, 2 of those. And then moving on to our non-creature spells at common, we've got Shock, a single red for 2 damage to target creature or player, Taste of Blood, Incinerate, Hideous Visage, and then in here, and I don't know if I separated these out, no I didn't. So here's our mana base, very simple, no mana fixing as such. Within this, so no special lands for this. It was just basic land in this particular deck. Just there, so you can see the artwork on there. Okay, Swamp and Mountains all the way down. Next up we have the other deck which I bought. So this was the blue-white deck. Mystical, I think it's Mystical Might. Sphinx of Uthun, 5 and 2 blue for a creature Sphinx with flying. When Sphinx of Uthun enters the battlefield, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put one into your hand and the other into your graveyard. And that's a 5/6. Lord of the Unreal, so we have an Illusion Lord. 2 blue for a 2/2 creature human wizard. Illusion creatures you control get +1/+1 and have hexproof. They can't be the targets of spells or abilities your opponents control. And then moving on to our uncommon creatures, Rusted Sentinel. There's a couple of those. Arbalist Elite. Phantasmal Dragon, so no surprise to see here in a illusion deck. A couple of those, Syrah Angel, Elixir of Immortality, so we're moving on to our non-creature spells that are uncommon. Two of those. There's our Oblivion Rings, we've got Levitation, some Mind Control in here, and then moving on to our commons, a couple of Phantasmal, in fact no, 3 Phantasmal Bears, a couple of a couple of Stormfront Pegasus. Wow, my pronunciation is way out of whack today. So yeah, 2 Stormfront Pegasus, Coral Merfolk, 3 of those, Benelish Veteran, a couple of those, Skywinder Drake, 3 of those, Avon Fleetwing, a couple of those, Ether Adepts, Siege Mastodon, and then moving on to our non-creature spells at common, 2 Unsummons, a Negate, a Cancel, and another Cancel, so a lot of blue control spells there. And then our basic land here, so again this is going to be blue and white in here, and so you can get a better idea of the land in here. So in a moment we'll take a look at the event deck. And you might see some similarities between this particular intro deck and the event deck, although the event deck itself is much more powerful. It's an illusions deck, and obviously there's certain issues with doing that, and problems. Okay. So what I'm going to do, let's have a look at this. Seem to be missing a card. Let's just go through this. I think I messed around with the order a bit on this. So you can see the big problem with illusions is that when they become the target of a spell or ability, you have to sack it, and so this makes a deck like this sort of super vulnerable. And so there's ways in which you can deal with that, and in this particular deck, one of the ways of protecting it is to put that illusion lord in there that we saw. Now, one of the problems is like, how many in the deck are you going to need? And I think one of the big issues with this deck is there's not many. So that's one tweak that I think with this deck you'd have to do. But I can't remember how many times I did actually play this deck, but I was sort of felt rather disappointed by the deck being so vulnerable to this fact that when it's when these creatures become the target of spells or abilities, you basically sack them. And on the upside, what happens is that you get a lot of creature for the casting cost. So with Phantasmal Dragon, it's 2 and a blue, but you get a 5/5 with flying. So of course what you're relying on is the fact that, or hoping, is that your opponent doesn't have any targeted spells that target a creature in any way, because anyway anything that targets this creature is going to get rid of it. Okay, so Phantasmal Dragons were in here. We had 3 of those. We have 4 Phantasmal Bears, an Ether Adept, which of course you can't use on your own or a lot of these illusions, because if you target it to bounce a creature back to do a trick with it, it's just going to sack you're going to have to sack the creature. So 4 of those. Porcelain Legionnaire. It's funny about this deck is that, you know, I think the word to sum up this deck is fragile. So we got, you know, a 3/1 creature. And I think the idea with this is to fill it with cards. So they put cards in here which you could get out, you know, a lot quicker than normal, but they had a sort of downside. The Spine Thopter. You notice the use of Phyrexian mana on these cards is going to help facilitate maybe a quicker casting, because instead of using mana to do it, you can use life. Spine Thopter. Got Mind Control to steal creatures from opponents. Preordain is in here. Mana Leaks. There's our counter spells. Okay, here we go. So here's our rare Lord of the Unreal. It's 2 blue, 2/2 Allegiant creatures. You control, get +1/+1 and have hexproof. Grand Architect's also in here. 1 and 2 blue for 1/3 creature, Vidalcan Artificer. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Target artifact creature becomes blue until end of turn. Tap and untap blue creature you control. Add 2 to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. So the deck's very much about trying to get stuff out a lot faster than you would normally. There's a couple of those. There's a Phantasmal Image, which we saw in my sort of rare binder. Precursor Golem is in here. 5 for a 3/3. When Precursor Golem enters the battlefield, put 2 3/3 colourless Golem artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single golem, that player copies that spell for each other golem that spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those golems. Still Hellkite's in here. Lots of interesting artifacts in this deck actually. And then moving on to our mana base, we've got Glimmer Post. And is there a full set of those. We've got Glacial Fortress. So another one of these cycle of rare lands that were check lands, and that was for white blue, just a single one of those, and then a blue white basic lands in here. So that was the particular event deck that I got, and I think the reason why I bought it was I just found it really interesting. I was curious as to how the deck interactions and synergies in here, but you can see there is that sort of inherent fragility to the deck if you don't have certain key cards in there to really advance or protect the illusions, and also to allow you to get cards out a lot faster than you would. Here's the sideboard that went with it. All event decks have a sideboard with them. So we had Flash Freeze in there, and there's a couple of copies of those. Negate, 2 of those. Frost Breath, 2 of those. Nurok Commando, 4 of those actually. Stoic Rebuttal, Master Thief, 3 of those. Another Mind Control, and some tokens for those golems. Okay, so that's one of the event decks. That was, like I said, the only one I bought. So what I'll do now is we'll just quickly have a look at some commons and uncommons. As you can probably imagine, I have quite a few of these. This is the first time with one of these boxes I've actually managed to fill the box with cards, which is quite rare for me. I don't think I open well, probably I open more than some people do, but compared to some of the stuff I see opened, I don't open generally don't open a whole booster box of stuff, so it's quite unusual for me to have this many commons and uncommons in a set. So you remember I mentioned about the cycle of mages, there's that uncommon there. And one of the nice things about core sets, and we were sort of talking about with expansion sets, how you get certain things in certain colours which are not so much rebranded. I'm trying to think the word I'm thinking of, but they're put a twist on for a set. Well, with a core set, what you're often getting is a sort of unadulterated version of what that colour is all about. So I think you can learn an awful lot from core sets in terms of getting an idea of what the basic philosophies are of the different colours. So I'm just going to flick through these. So again, you just get a nice overview. So Oblivion Ring, Pacifism. Not surprising in white to see Flyers and some Defenders. Good old Seer Angel, some vanilla creatures, and then white often we see quite a lot in there. We don't see things like Circle of Protection anymore in white like we did in older sets, but look, white's very much about protecting things. You'll see Tap Down in here, but certainly white's the sort of go-to place for things like Flyers. As I said, again, we should keep a lookout for things like enchantment auras, because there was a minor enchantment aura theme in here. So I'm just going to fiddle with my camera. I seem to be having a problem with the power supply, which is annoying. That's better. Okay. Right. These are Pectite. I don't like doing this to cards, even though they're commons and uncommons. I shouldn't put those all back. Okay. It's not packed as tight as it could be, but it's pretty full. Okay, so we've got Ether Adept, which we saw in I think one of the intro decks. You can see that. So some cancels, removal, blue Flyers, vanilla. We're going to see Merfolk. So what we're going to see, is obviously vanilla creatures in here that are typical of that colour. So we're going to see Merfolk. We're going to see again this sort of enchantment stuff. Tap Down in blue. Got Island Walk. The control spell. There's the common signature spell, Jace's Erasure, giving something flying. Another counter spell. More Merfolk. Even more Merfolk. Mind Control, Negate. Obviously you saw that illusions was a thing. There's Ponder. Nice manipulation at the top of the library and card draw. And Unsummon for dealing with bouncing target creatures. And also destroying illusions. Okay, moving on to black. Oh, what sort of creatures are we going to see in black? Well, not surprisingly, vampires. More enchantments, more vampires. There's that 2-card cycle, Dark Favour, Divine Favour, Death Mark, Devouring Swarm. I think I mentioned that colour hosing was a thing in the set as well. Distress. Doomblade was still in core actually at that point. Shade in here, bats, and zombies. We saw that Zombie Lord. Mind Rot, card discards, a thing in black. Reassembling Skeleton. These sort of creature cards that you're able to get back from the graveyard are super annoying. Smallpox was in the set. Taste of Blood. Another zombie there. And Zombie Infestation. Discard 2 cards, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So moving to red. And active trees in the set. So there's our Bloodthirst. I don't think I went through Bloodthirst actually, I mentioned it. So Bloodthirst 1. If an opponent was dealt damage this turn, this creature enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counters on it. And that was a returning ability. So we get giants in red. More enchantments, direct damage. There's Chandra's common signature card. Mages, I mentioned that. So this is uncommon. This is the Crimson Mage. 1 and a red, 2/1. Red, target creature you control gains haste until end of turn. I believe they're all 2/1s. Fiery Hellhounds. You often see in red fire breathing attached to a creature. Oh, and there's fire breathing as an enchantment. Fling, another very red thing. We've got goblins, ton of goblins. Because we're in red. Incinerate was in the set. Pretty final. 1 and a red. Incinerate deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Creature dealt damage this way can't be regenerated this turn. Lava Axe is in here. Pretty common to see Lava Axe in a core set. Lightning Elemental as well. Manic Vandal. Shocks in here, which we'd seen I think in an intro deck. This card's got Bloodthirst 2 on it. So Tectonic Rift. Land Destruction is obviously a red thing. Volcanic Dragon. Wall of Torches. So there was I think a few walls in here, a few defender things. Okay. So green. Arachnus Web. There's our another enchantment. Bountiful Harvest. Brindlebore was in here. Carnage Worm. Cudgel Troll. Fogs in green. Here's the common signature card for Garrick's Companion. Giant Spider. I'm trying to remember where this is a set which had a lot of spiders in green. There's another hexproof card on Glade ability on Glade Cover Scout. Greater Basilisk. Land of War Elves, so no surprise to see mana fixing in green. Lure. We see lots of lure type cards in green. Lurking Crocodile, Naturalize to deal with artifacts and enchantments. Overrun, like green's a place of overrun effects. Plummet. Green has to have a sort of way of dealing with flying, and it does that through either plummet or by having spiders which have reach on them. Rampant Growth. Reclaim as a way of getting stuff back from the graveyard and putting it in the library. Good old bear. Sacred Wolf. Stampeding Rhino. Another spider. Titanic Growth. We had a Titanic Growth in here. It's Troll Hide, which gives something regeneration. Another worm. Just a close it off, vanilla one there. And then just quick flick through our commons and uncommons for our artifacts. So I mentioned there was a cycle of these lucky charms. Angel's Feather was one such card. We had Crumbling Colossus, which you see, another lucky charm. Demon's Horn, Dragon's Claw, Elixir of Immortality, cool EDH card. Great Sword, equipped creature gets +3/+0, equipped for 3, it's 3 to cast. Kite Shield was a zero casting cost piece of equipment. It's +0/+3 and 3 to equip. Kraken's Eye was another one of those lucky charms. Manalith was in here, so 3 colourless, tap, add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool. Rusted Sentinel. So you remember I mentioned about the Empire cards, so this is one of them, Sceptre of Empires. 3 tapped, Sceptre of Empires deals 1 damage to a creature. It deals 3 damage to that player instead if you control artifacts named Crown of Empires and Throne of Empires. And they had this sort of interactive synergy on and each of the cards was, I believe, pumped by the other cards being present. Thran Golem, and then our final lucky charm. So you can see each one of those lucky charms represents a different colour of magic. Oh, one last thing I didn't mention. So our uncommon land was Buried Ruin. Tap, add 1 to your mana pool. 2, tap, sacrifice Buried Ruin. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, so that's it for the core set. That took quite a long time to just have a look at that, but I thought it's interesting to see, you know, the sort of colours in overview, particularly at common and uncommon, and it sort of, I think, gives you a nice representation of, you know, for a particular set, what the broad themes of that set were. Because commons and uncommons are going to be the cards that you will see the most when you're opening packs, and I think I've mentioned before this concept of as fan, where, you know, what you see as you fan the cards out in a booster, and obviously Wizards want to get people, if they don't open many boosters, to still get quite a good representation of what the set's about. And commons and uncommons, because of their higher prevalence in boosters, is a good way of doing that. So now we'll move on to the next thing, which is the From the Vaults product. And I actually have one of these. I unboxed it at the time, and I've kept it in its boxing, although it is unpacked. Hopefully these cards haven't bowed too much, which is a problem with anybody that's got these From the Vaults will know. And obviously that can be helped by keeping them in a fairly rigid sleeve. These haven't been. They don't seem to have suffered too much, although there is some visible bowing there. But I've seen some which are bowed much worse than this. Okay, so it comes in a really nice box. This is probably, and I found it interesting that this happened. The prices on these normally really get jacked up. They're like a premium product. There's not many of them. And at the time when I bought this, I made a point of hunting it down because of the presence of these legendary creatures. And even before I was aware of EDH or Commander, I think because my first exposure in terms of opening Magic cards was 10th edition, which I think was probably the first core set to have legendary creatures in it. I've always had this sort of affinity for legendary creatures, and it always sort of interests me. And so it's probably the main reason I bought this. But it was surprisingly, when it first came out, you know, the price stayed surprisingly stable, which did surprise me. I thought they'd really get snapped up for EDH. So what this does is in here, you have this sort of review of everything, and then on the back it explains a bit about Legends, and their place in Magic's history. So let's look at these. We have, I think this is the first time they did it in a From the Vaults product. Actually had this sort of branded spin down counter, so we got a gold one here which matches the sort of colour scheme of it. So there's our symbol, and it's a sort of mottled gold with very dark brown sort of tinges there. I don't know how that's coming out on camera, probably massively out of focus. Yeah. Okay. So what have we got in here? I don't know if these are in any particular order. You can see there we do have a bit of a bend on these cards, and you can see how foily these are. And I just move that Viscera there. So we have in here we have Viscera Dreadful, Viscera the Dreadful, Shroom the Hegemon, Sun Huan Lord of Wu, Tefari Mage of Zulfir, and Ulamog the Infinite Gaia. Nice foily Ulamog. There's a Rafik of the Many in here. Kresh the Blood Braided. Omnath Locus of Mana. Una Queen of the Fae. Progenitus was in here. Mykius the Lunarch. Captain Sisay. Doran the Siege Tower. Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. Cow Lord of Wei. And that's in there. If you're curious, of those 15 legendary creatures that were in there, all of these are quite clearly black border, and that's post 8th edition style card frames. Obviously it's not the most recent iteration of the card frames with the additional sort of anti what I'm looking for, but they have that additional hologram on them, which these obviously don't because they were made before that. They're all holographic foil. 7 have new art. The 7 that had new art were the Teferi, the Kresh, the Progenitus, the Kiki-Jiki, the Rafik, the Shroom, and the Viscera. Okay. So that's that. Let me just put this all back together. Put that away in my EDH cupboard. Okay, so that was the From the Vaults Legend, and now the last thing I want to just do is the dual decks. So there was the dual decks out in, when was that? September the 2nd, and it was the Ajani versus Nicol Bolas, which I think is rather apt, the timing on this, with Nicol Bolas making an appearance in the most recent set. This is the 8th dual deck, 2x 60 cards. The Ajani was a green, red, white with a number of... the Ajani was in foil, and there were a number of reds in there, which we'll see in a moment. And Nicol Bolas was blue, red, black, and same thing, a main lead card with foil and then a number of rares. You get more rares in these than you would in a, say, an intro pack. I always find the dual decks very interesting. Unfortunately, recently there's been a price hike on these. Quite a considerable price hike, actually. So, let me just give you a quick view of this. Another thing I always point out with this, you're going to get cards from all over Magic. Sometimes those choices will gravitate around a certain set, dependent on what the style of the deck is. So with this deck, where you've got like a 3 colour deck, you often find that they go. You sometimes see cards in here from sets that were well known for their sort of multicolour bias in here. But again, you know, you're going to see stuff from all over the place. But I can, just looking at this, I can see stuff from, you know, Eventide and Alara and Shadowmoor, places like. But also, well, again, I mean, I suppose, yeah, Ravnica was a multicolour set. But also got stuff from the core set as well, and even as far back as Arabian Nights in the shape of Curd Ape, and the Nicol Bolas deck, similar sort of thing. So we're seeing stuff from Conflux, Ravnica, Lorwyn. We've got stuff here from, you know, there's stuff from Invasion and Torment, and anything else really stick out? Less core set stuff. But we've got things like Icy Manipulator, which is, you know, first printed way back in Alpha. And then a bit about the backstory, and also, you know, obviously how to play the deck. This should also come with the appropriate tokens, as with all of these dual decks. Still unsleeved. Let's see, this has not been played. So this was a Planeswalker themed dual deck. You normally find that dual decks form into one of two categories. They either revolve around some antagonism between Planeswalkers, or there's some theme to do with, particularly tribal theme, but it can be a conceptual theme with a certain legend as the lead card, maybe. So there was like Might versus Mind was one example of that, but equally we've seen tribal themes as well as conceptual themes. Okay, so Ajani Vengeant, 2 red white, Planeswalker Ajani, 3 loyalty, +1 is target permanent doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Ajani Vengeant deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 3 life. Destroy all lands target player controls. It's the -7. So we've got a +1, a -2, and a -7. So our other rares are Loxodon Hierarch, Ageless Entity, Firemane Angel, Searing Meditation, Titanic Ultimatum, and then moving to our non-mythic rares and rares, so uncommons and commons. Now we've got Curd Ape. You notice we have a special set symbol for this dual deck. Lone Lion, Jade Mage, Ajani's Pride Mate, a couple of those, Woolly Thoctor, Fleetwood Panther, Briarhorn. Notice a lot of one-offs. One thing you get, which is really cool in the dual deck because it's a nostalgia trip, is very high variance, because there's a lot of singleton cards in these. Spite Mare, Maurice's Twin Claws, Pride of Lions, the Cattle Hunt Pride, Lightning Helix, Lead the Stampede, Griffin Guide, Behemoth Sledge, Naya Charm, Wildner Cattle, Essence Warden, Sylvan Ranger, there's a couple of those, Canyon Wildcat, Kasali Pride Mage, Glazing Gradeheart, Recumbent Bliss, 2 of those, Ajani's Mantra, Sylvan Bounty, 3 of those, and then moving on to our non-basic lands, Vitu-Ghazi the City Tree, which will generate sapling creature tokens, as well as tapping for colourless mana. Sapseep Forest, life gain on it. Kazandu Refuge, so this was one of these refuge where it enters the battlefield tapped, but you gain 1 life and it taps for red or green. Jungle Shrine, enters the battlefield tapped but fixed for red, green or white, and useful to have 2 of those in this deck. Greypelt Refuge, so another refuge but for green or white. There was Evolving Wilds in here, it's a couple of those, and then our mana base with our basic land side of things. So we got forests here, and so just so you can get a feel for the artwork that was used for this particular dual deck. I didn't look to see if the set for the artwork was marked up on that player's guide actually. So our planes, because I know quite a few people like me love to see the particular artwork that was thematically used to complement the deck's theme. And so we have a Griffin token in here as well. I think those set pulling tokens might be with the other deck, but we will see. One interesting thing actually while I'm getting this ready, I don't know if anybody's tried this with dual decks. Often when you look at these dual decks you think, oh, this would be a real cool deck to what I commonly think called Commander-Eyes. So there's certain synergies inherently within the deck which lend themselves well to that, but also there's a lot of one-offs and a lot of cards from Magic's history, and you do just look at that card and you go, oh, I'd love to play that in an EDH Commander deck. One useful feature on EDH Rec, which I've just been fiddling around with and I'm thinking of doing some sort of series built around, is you can actually put in a card list, even if it's just not complete. So in theory you could put in a card list. It's trickier with this because of course the lead cards here aren't, within regular Commander wouldn't count as commanders unless you were playing under house rules which let you play planeswalkers. But just generally particularly with these dual decks that have a legendary creature as the lead card, you can put that in and just see what synergies it spits out in addition to the cards you already have, and what cards it thinks might be practical within a Commander EDH deck. It's just an interesting thing to do, because I know on several of my videos people have commented about certain dual decks, making you want to build Commander decks around them. So if you're stuck for ideas, that's always a good place to just use for inspiration. So Nicol Bolas Planeswalker, 4 blue, black, red, or should I say 4 blue, black, black, red, 5 Loyalty Planeswalker Bolas, +3 destroy target non-creature permanent, -2 gain control of target creature, and -9 ultimate. Nicol Bolas Planeswalker deals 7 damage to target player. That player discards 7 cards, then sacrifices 7 permanents. So our rares in this deck are Dimmer Cutpurse, Blazing Spectre, Profane Command, Undermine, Cruel Ultimatum, and then beyond that, moving on to uncommons and commons, we have Slavering Gnolls, Hellfire Mongrel, there's a couple of those, Moroi, Firefield Ogre, Shriekmaws in this deck, Counter Squall, Grixis Charm, Deep Analysis, Icy Manipulator, Slave of Bolas, Elder Mastery, Pain and Suffering, Rise and Fall, Spite and Malice, Surviving Sprite, Nightscape Familiar, Brightwater Elemental, Morgue Toad, Steam Core Weird, Ogre Savant, Jessian Zombies, Igneous Pouncer, Vapor Snag, Recoil, Agonizing Demise, Obelisk of Grixis, so we've got artifact mana fixing here. 2 of those. Crumbling Necropolis, a couple of those. A Rupture Spire, and a couple of Terramorphic Expanses. So you can see the way it fixes for blue, red, black in this deck is different the way that the Ajani Vengeance fixes it for its colour. And then moving on to our slightly grimmer artwork for Nicol Bolas. So we've got our swamps, our islands, and finally our mountains. There's quite a big contrast there with the artwork. Oops. And then there's our sapling token that was mentioned in the Ajani deck. Okay, so that's the final thing I wanted to look at, the Ajani versus Nicol Bolas dual decks. So just to recap, we had a look at quite an extensive look at Magic 2012, the core set there for this quarter from July to September. From the False Legend, which came out August 29th. So the Magic 2012 came out July 15th. The dual decks Ajani versus Nicol Bolas September the 2nd. Now, I do know that Innistrad actually came out on September the 30th, so technically it should be in this episode, but I'm deferring it to the next episode, so we'll have a couple of things to talk about. Otherwise, I think the only thing we'd be talking about next episode is, I think, maybe the Graveborn premium deck. So anyway, we'll have a look at Innistrad in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.